It is with great joy that Faith Chronicles now presents its brand new audio podcast format, the Deep Dive Faith Chronicles. From now on, we will bring you in-depth, research-based, and spiritually enriching conversations on the most relevant topics for our Catholic faith. If you are looking for a richer understanding of the history of the saints, Catholic doctrine, and solid spiritual guidance, this format is for you. Every episode is the result of extensive and detailed research. If you want the full material that originated this and all other episodes, simply access the link below in the description or in the first pinned comment. We invite you to join this deep dive and subscribe to the channel to receive new episodes first. Your participation is key. Send us your questions or suggest new topics in the comments below. Let's deepen our faith together.
Deep Dive Faith Chronicles.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're really digging into something vital for any serious Catholic learner. We're trying to move the whole idea of modesty, away from just subjective feelings or cultural rules.
Yeah, where you usually get stuck.
Exactly. And move it into, the solid structure of objective moral theology. Because let's face it, this topic, it almost always gets debated based on personal takes.
Oh, absolutely. It's all I feel, or in my opinion.
Right. So our mission today is different. We want to understand the Church's doctrinal framework, the objective reasons behind it all.
That's exactly it. You bring up dress and dignity today, and the conversation often just hits a wall, doesn't it? It's all my body, my rules, or this deep kind of moral relativism.
Yep. Seen it 100 times.
We're going to try and sidestep that completely. Our deep dive today, it's using some really comprehensive theological studies, and they ground modesty not in feelings, but in objective reason and in the objective dignity of the human person, the imago Dei, And really critically, in the profound philosophical work of Pope St. John Paul II, especially his personalist norm.
So the sources we've gathered, they treat modesty as, not optional, right? As a key part of the moral life, defining it as protecting something sacred.
That's the core idea, protecting the sacred.
So we're going deep on doctrine today. We're trying to figure out why the Church insists on an objective standard for how we present ourselves, our bodies in the world, and what that actually means for, true freedom.
Okay, let's unpack this, starting with, the necessary first step. Rejecting moral relativism.
Has to be the start.
We're just swimming in a culture that assumes morality, especially anything about the body, sexuality, it's all self-determined. But our sources, they say Catholic moral theology finds that starting point.
Right.
Well, just inadequate. Why is that?
Because, look, if the dignity of the human person is objective,
then the moral claims that arise from that dignity.
Yeah.
They have to be objective too. It just follows logically. If you start from the premise, modesty is whatever I feel it is, or, whatever my culture says today.
Yeah.
You've basically reduced the human person to just an artifact, something shaped by shifting ideas, by customs. That's not stable.
Not enough weight there.
Not nearly enough. The Church insists that questions touching on something as fundamental as dignity, they have to be rooted in objective reality. And for Catholics, that means objective reason established by God.
And that framework, that's the natural moral law, right? The NML.
Exactly.
So for our listener who might know the term but needs a bit more, maybe a deeper philosophical dive on it, what is the NML? And why is its immutability, its unchanging nature, so foundational here?
Right. The natural moral law.
Yeah.
It's honestly one of the most powerful concepts in Catholic thought because it takes morality out of the realm of just arbitrary commands, do this because I said so. It's the objective standard of right and wrong. And the Church teaches it's present in the heart of each man and established by reason. It's not something external we just have to follow blindly. It's inherent to our nature.
Baked in almost.
Baked in.
Huh?
Thomas Aquinas, famously, he didn't define it as just a list of rules. He said it's nothing other than the light of understanding placed in us by God. It's this light, this reason, that lets us discern. Okay, this is good, this is evil. It's written into our being.
So it's built into the blueprint of humanity, like gravity is built into the physical universe. It's a kind of moral physics.
That's a great way to put it, a moral physics.
Yeah.
And because its source is God's own wisdom, the creator, the NML has three qualities that are just vital here.
Okay.
One, it's universal in its precepts. That applies to everyone, everywhere, always.
Right.
2, it's immutable. It doesn't change with fashion or opinion polls.
Doesn't bend to the times.
Nope. And 3, it's permanent. And this universality, this permanence, it provides the indispensable moral foundation, as the Catechism says, for building human community. So if a principle about modesty is rooted in the NML, well, it simply cannot be arbitrary. It can't be negotiable based on just, well, I prefer this.
Okay, that makes sense. And this philosophical urgency, it connects directly to what you mentioned, the modern crisis of truth, which Pope St. John Paul II tackled head-on in Veritatis Splendor, right?
The Splendor of Truth.
Yes, 1993. Foundational encyclical.
The source material says this is essential context.
Yeah.
What specific error was JPII fighting against that relates directly to, say, morality around the body?
Well, he was addressing a broad issue, systematic calling into question of traditional moral doctrine, as he put it. Specifically, he was really challenging certain moral theologians who were pushing philosophical errors like proportionalism or consequentialism.
Like basically say.
Basically argue that the morality of an act depends on weighing the outcomes, the consequences, rather than the act itself being inherently good or bad.
Got it. But the core error, the one that really hits home for personal morality, like modesty, was this claim that the individual's conscience, that it should be the supreme tribunal of moral judgment.
The idea that I create my own good. I define what's right or wrong for me, and that's the end of it. No objective truth needed.
Precisely. And that leads straight into a really dangerous misunderstanding of freedom. So many people today confuse freedom with just absolute autonomy, the power to choose anything, no matter its objective moral status.
Right.
But JPII taught, no, true freedom isn't the autonomy to redefine good and evil. True freedom is freedom for the good and freedom in the truth.
So if I choose something evil, I'm not actually more free. I'm becoming enslaved to disorder.
That's exactly the definition of concupiscence, isn't it? That disordered desire we inherit after the fall. Conscience, in the proper Catholic view, it doesn't determine moral truth. Its job, its only job, is to judge an action against the objective truth that exists outside of it. So if my conscience tells me, oh, X is perfectly fine, but X objectively violates the natural moral law, well, my conscience is wrong, and I have a moral duty to correct it, to form it properly.
Okay, so bringing it back to modesty then, the takeaway here is huge. The morality of how we present our body, whether clothing is revealing or not, it absolutely cannot be just subjective. It can't just depend on the flux of ideas and customs.
Absolutely not.
The body and how we present it, they have an objective moral meaning, and that meaning comes from God's design, from the NML.
Yes. It stabilizes the whole discussion, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It moves us away from saying, well, I feel like this is modest, and towards asking, does this way of presenting the body actually align with the objective moral claims rooted in the person's dignity?
Right. A totally different question.
Totally different. And that framework, that objective grounding, it lets us move logically to the next step, defining what that objective dignity actually is.
Okay, so we've got the foundation of objective truth set. Now let's build on that. Let's turn to the bedrock of Catholic anthropology, right? The worth of the body itself. And this starts with the Imago Dei, the image of God. How does this basic truth immediately lift the discussion about the human body way beyond just biology?
Well, the Imago Dei means the person's dignity isn't earned, it's not negotiable, it's intrinsic. Why? Because we're created in the image and likeness of God himself. That's the ultimate statement of objective worth, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is.
Genesis tells us, God looked at everything he made and found it very good. And therefore, the church teaches the human body and sex must likewise be good. This is so crucial. We are not operating from some kind of dualistic view where the body is bad or dirty and only the soul is good.
Right, that's a common misconception.
A huge one. No, the body is objectively good. It's sacred. It's precious. That's just a fact of creation.
That distinction is really important, I think, because modesty often gets twisted in popular culture into being a kind of body shaming. But the sources are saying the opposite. Modesty is actually an act of venerating the body's objective goodness.
Precisely. It flows from recognizing its worth. And this objective dignity, it gets profoundly ramped up, you could say, through baptism. We don't just carry the image of God anymore. We become something even more. The sources really emphasize St. Paul's teaching here. The body becomes a temple of the Holy Spirit.
That passage from 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verses 19 to 20, it's really seismic, isn't it? Especially in a world that just screams total bodily autonomy. Paul's words are, "You are not your own. You were bought at a price. Therefore, glorify God in your body."
That is the critical moral hinge for any Catholic seriously thinking about this. The claim is, well, it's radically countercultural, as one source puts it. It directly refutes that idea of absolute unlimited autonomy over the body. Because the theological reality is that the body is now a sacred space. It's a dwelling place of the Holy Spirit. And therefore, the individual doesn't fully own it in the secular sense of being able to do absolutely anything they want with it. It belongs to God.
Okay, so if my body is a sacred temple and I don't fully own it in that secular way, then the moral imperative about how I dress, it shifts completely. It's not just about self-expression anymore. It's about stewardship, glorification.
Yes, it becomes an objective duty of reverence. To glorify God in your body means treating it in a way that's fitting for its status as a sacred space. That means honoring it, protecting it, maintaining its integrity, its mystery.
So what's the consequence then from this theological viewpoint of choosing deliberate immodesty?
Well, the contrast, as the sources point out, is pretty stark. To treat the body like just a common object, to expose its sacred parts carelessly, indiscriminately, that's treating a sacred space profanely. One analyst described it very vividly, saying it's like effacing one's own dignity.
Wow.
It's a willful act of disrespect, not just to oneself, but to the temple of the Holy Spirit dwelling within. So modesty isn't about rules imposed from outside. It's about reverence coming from the inside, protecting the objective sacredness of God's dwelling place.
So this foundation in the Imago Dei and the temple idea, that gives us the objective why behind the specific moral claims the church makes about dress.
Exactly. It's the theological bedrock.
Okay, this is where we transition, I think. We move from the objective fact of the body's dignity to the philosophical mechanism by which that dignity gets violated. And for that, we turn to Pope St. John Paul II again and his incredible philosophical contribution, the personalist norm. He detailed it in Love and Responsibility, right?
Yes, a seminal work, absolutely foundational.
Yeah, so how does this norm, how does it define the core violation of human dignity? And why is the body so often the flashpoint for this kind of violation?
Right. The personalist norm, you could argue it's the single most important concept for really getting Catholic sexual morality. It's like the philosophical firewall protecting human dignity. John Paul II saw that the fundamental transgression against a person is using them.
Okay.
So the norm states, in its negative form, the person is the kind of good which does not admit of use and cannot be treated as an object of use, and as such, the means to an end.
Meaning, a person must always be treated as an end in themselves, never just as a tool or a means to get something else.
Exactly. Always an end. And the positive form of the norm completes the picture. The person is a good towards which the only proper and adequate attitude is love.
Love, meaning?
Meaning willing the good of the other person for their sake, not for what you can get out of them. So the central conflict in how humans interact is always between love and use.
Okay.
And when we talk about the body, about sexuality, the end for which a person is typically used is, well, pleasure, gratification, and that drive to use another for pleasure. That is the definition of lust.
So lust isn't just like a really strong feeling of attraction the way secular culture might frame it.
No, it's much deeper.
It's fundamentally a philosophical violation, a theological one. It's the choice to use the person as a means to my own pleasure.
Precisely. It's what JPI called the reductive gaze. Lust isn't just appreciating beauty. That's different. Lust is, well, it's an act of aggression in a way. It isolates the sexual value from the whole person. It looks at someone and desires to grasp and possess the object for gratification. Instead of desiring to give to and honor the whole person, the person gets reduced to just their sexual components, depersonalized.
This perfectly explains that common, almost instinctive feeling of offense that recoil a person feels when they're objectified in public. You know, why does a woman feel violated when some stranger leers at her or makes an aggressive comment about her body?
Because she is fundamentally experiencing a kind of philosophical violence. She is being used, that stranger's gaze. It has reduced her, a sacred person, an end in herself, into an object of consumption for his own internal end, his pleasure. That's why it feels like violence to the very essence of the other, as the source puts it. Because it violates the only proper response to a person, which is love, that recoil she feels. It's rational. It's a God-given defense mechanism protecting her inherent dignity.
Okay, this leads us straight to the Catechism's definition of modesty then. It says, modesty protects the intimate center of the person. It means refusing to unveil what should remain hidden. Now, the critical question is the metaphysics of privacy. Why? Why must certain parts remain hidden?
Yeah, this is a deep theological point, and it's often misunderstood. Those parts are private, not because they're shameful, not because they're sinful or dirty in themselves. They're private because they are sacred.
And reserved.
Reserved. Given the analogy used in the source, the Holy of Holies in the Jerusalem temple, it was veiled. Why? Not because it was ugly or repulsive, but because it was the dwelling place of God's glory. It was too holy for common sight, for common access.
Okay, I see the parallel.
The intimate parts of the human body. They're the physical, spiritual locus, the place where the person's highest calling resides. The ability to make a sincere gift of self, to realize the nuptial meaning of the body.
The body parts linked to procreation, to total self-giving love, they're reserved because they are the very instruments of a gift so profound it's sacramental in marriage.
Exactly. They're reserved for that unique communion of persons that is love, marriage.
Yeah.
Their telos, their ultimate purpose, their end goal is total, exclusive self-giving. So to make those parts public, to display them commonly, it desacralizes them. It severs those intimate parts from their sacred purpose. It reduces the sacred sign of the person into a public object available for common consumption. And that profanes their dignity, and frankly, it invites use.
So modesty becomes the active choice, the virtue of preserving the sacredness and preserving the potential exclusivity of that gift.
Precisely. It's the practical application, the living out of the personalist norm. It's how I ensure that I present myself to the world as an end, worthy of love, and not merely as a means available for use.
Okay, let's turn now to a really tricky word, shame. Modern culture seems pretty united in labeling shame as toxic, inherently destructive.
Right, it gets a very bad rap.
But the sources we're looking at, leaning heavily on the theology of the body, they introduce this idea of positive sexual shame. What's the fundamental difference between that toxic shame, like shame about just existing, and this positive protective shame?
That distinction is crucial. Toxic shame, as you said, makes you feel fundamentally bad or wrong for just being, or maybe bad about your body itself. It crushes the person. Positive sexual shame, as John Paul II understood it, is something different. It arose after the fall.
Okay.
Remember, in the state of original innocence, Adam and Eve were naked, but they felt no shame. Why? Because their gaze, their perception of each other was completely pure, integrated. Shame entered the world only as a necessary defense mechanism against the new reality in the human heart, the reality of lust.
So it's not shame of the body itself, it's more like a healthy fear or awareness of being objectified, of being seen wrongly.
Exactly. JPI called it a boundary experience. It's like a built-in alarm system that warns the person. Danger. Risk of being viewed reductively. Risk of being used. It's this instinctive, self-protective reaction that prompts us to shield our sexual values from that objectifying gaze.
And modesty, then, is the virtue, the rational, willed choice that corresponds to this positive instinct.
Yes, precisely. The instinct sounds the alarm. My dignity is threatened. Modesty, which falls under the cardinal virtue of temperance, is the deliberate, willed choice to act on that alarm. It's the decision to, as the Catechism says, refuse to unveil what should remain hidden.
So someone who suppresses this instinct, who chooses to be shameless, they aren't really liberated in this view.
Not at all. According to this framework, they've dangerously disabled their own internal alarm system. They've left their dignity undefended against the potential violence of the reductive gaze.
Okay. This philosophical framework seems to lead us straight into what the sources call the economy of the gift. This idea that true intimacy depends on exclusivity. We know the person is created for love, and love is expressed as a gift.
Yes, and that concept is what JPIA termed the nuptial meaning of the body. The idea that the person cannot fully find himself except through the sincere gift of self. But for that self-finding, that fulfillment to happen, the gift has to be total, authentic, integral.
Right, which is why the Catechism says chastity requires both the integrity of the person and the integrality of the gift. The offering has to be complete, whole.
It has to be total and lifelong in its intention, especially within marriage.
Let's expand on that powerful love letter analogy you mentioned earlier, because I think it really explains the mechanism of how public exposure causes a kind of spiritual damage. How does the public gaze functionally diminish the ability to give that total gift later on?
Is it
Psychological, spiritual, both.
It's definitely both. Because remember, the human person is an inseparable unity of body and soul. You can't really split them. Spiritually, the value of a profound gift is tied irrevocably to its exclusivity.
Okay.
Think about it. If you write a poem expressing the deepest intimacy of your heart, solely for your spouse, it's a priceless treasure. It's reserved only for them. It signifies something unique between you two.
Right.
But if you take that same poem and publish it in a national magazine for everyone to read, it becomes, well, a commodity. It loses its unique power as a marker of exclusive total love shared between two people. It's still a poem, but its intimate value is diluted, made common.
And so when intimate, sacred aspects of the body are made publicly available through revealing clothing, the person is, in effect, publishing that exclusive language of love for mass consumption.
That's a good way to put it. They are offering the sacred sign of their personhood as a common spectacle. The functional diminishment happens because the integrity of the gift gets compromised. What is made commonly available in public, what is effectively spent on the public gaze, cannot simultaneously be reserved exclusively for the intimacy of marriage.
So it's like if the sight and the form of those private parts have already been offered up to the consumer gaze of countless strangers, that part of the gift is no longer pristine, no longer exclusive to the spouse.
Exactly. It's been devalued by being made common. Deliberate immodesty, therefore, functionally diminishes the person's capacity to offer a truly total or integral gift to a spouse down the line, because parts of that unique gift have already been commodified, shared with the world.
So it's not just about tempting the observer. It's about the presenter compromising their own future integrity of the gift.
It's a kind of theological fact of depletion, if you will. It risks reducing the highest expression of the person, total self-giving love, to a form of partial, generalized self-commodification. Modesty, then, is the active preservation of the integrity and the exclusivity of that gift, holding it in reserve until the moment the full, total gift can be rightly made within the marriage covenant. Okay, we've spent a good chunk of time setting up the philosophical and theological foundations. That was crucial. Now, let's try to apply these objective principles to the challenging reality of modern fashion.
Right, where the rubber meets the road, so to speak.
The source material really emphasizes that the offense someone feels when they're leered at, it's not irrational. It's a rational reaction to that reductive gaze we talked about, the gaze that reduces the person to just a collection of body parts.
And this isn't just abstract theory. Our sources actually confirm this psychologically. There are studies showing that when women are put in situations where they have to anticipate a male gaze, which, let's be honest, is often what revealing fashion is designed to elicit. Unfortunately, yes.
They experience significantly greater body shame and social physique anxiety. So that reductive gaze, it's not benign. It's actually an aggressive act that causes real, measurable psychological harm. It works against the dignity of the person.
Okay. So to give our listener, our learner, the tools to actually analyze modern clothing through this lens, we need to clearly distinguish between the two main ways clothing can be immodest. Because traditional critiques mostly focused on just one way, right? The unveiling of skin.
Yes, that's a key point. We have to analyze both the immodesty of exposure and the immodesty of form. Both mechanisms end up violating the personalist norm because they sever specific body parts from the whole person, setting them up for objectification. But they achieve it in slightly different ways.
Okay, let's start with the traditional one. Immodesty of exposure, or unveiling. What falls under that?
This is the more obvious one. It's simply the removal of fabric to unveil what should remain hidden. It's a direct violation of that catechism principle we discussed. Think of very low-cut tops that expose cleavage, miniskirts that reveal the upper thigh, short shorts, maybe strapless tops, depending on the cut and context. The mechanism here is exposing the private flesh itself for common public consumption. This is the oldest form, probably the easiest to recognize.
Right. But modern fashion relies heavily on the second form, too. Immodesty of form, or revealing the shape. How does this differ? And why is it sometimes maybe harder to pin down?
This mechanism is more subtle, perhaps, but often just as, if not more, sexualizing. It uses fabric that is very tight, snug-fitting, or sometimes even sheer or diaphanous, as one source called it, to reveal the form, the shape, the contours of what should be hidden.
Even if skin isn't technically showing.
Exactly. Even if skin isn't exposed. Think of extremely tight sweaters, very tight jeans, and, critically, the example everyone brings up, leggings or yoga pants when worn as everyday public streetwear, not just for athletics. This violates the personalist norm because it exposes the private form, the precise shape and definition of intimate parts for public consumption. It presents the person as a collection of sexually charged shapes rather than an integrated whole.
Okay, let's take a moment and really focus on that specific case study. Leggings and yoga pants, they're everywhere. The analysis in the source material is quite pointed here.
It has to be, if we're applying objective principles consistently. The analysis is careful to acknowledge, look, the garment itself isn't evil. Of course not. It has a legitimate athletic function where that tightness is actually necessary for performance or movement.
Right.
The moral error, the problem, arises in its contextual use. Specifically, when it's worn as general public streetwear, especially, the sources emphasize, when the top worn with it doesn't fully cover the posterior region.
And why does the source call it an unforgiving garment in that public context?
Because of its design and material. It's typically made to be thin, extremely form-fitting, and when worn that way in public, it inherently reveals the buttocks, as the analysis bluntly puts it. It doesn't just cover, it accentuates the form. So in that context, the garment functions to isolate a specific body part, a highly sexualized part in our culture, and emphasize its shape. It encourages that reductive gaze of lust we talked about. It risks transforming the perception of the whole person into just an object defined by that isolated part.
And the critique goes even further, suggesting it can be a form of self-objectification for the wearer, too, communicating something negative about her own dignity.
That's the really deep end of the critique, yes. By choosing to wear a garment in a way that isolates and highlights specifically sexualized features for public view, the analysis suggests the wearer might be unintentionally selling herself short, saying, in effect, that her most valuable assets are her sexual ones, rather than her whole personhood, her mind, her spirit, her character. It's presented as a potential tragedy of dignity, where the person might voluntarily reduce herself to a collection of desirable components, implicitly endorsing the very objectification she might later, and rightly, resent from others.
That's a heavy thought. Okay, moving back to the immodesty of exposure for a second. You mentioned garments like low-cut tops, short shorts. They're pretty explicit violations of that refusing to unveil principle. It seems important to show our learner that the Church's principles on coverage are consistent over time, even as specific styles change.
Absolutely. And this is where looking at historical magisterial precedent is helpful. It confirms the underlying principle of protective coverage. We're not just making up new rules for today. We're applying timeless moral principles to contemporary situations. For instance, consider the instructions issued back in the 1930s by the Cardinal Vicar under Pope Pius XIII regarding decent dress for women entering churches. But the principles had broader application.
Okay, what were those specific historical parameters, just as an example of the principle in action?
Well, the standard defined a decent dress at that time as one that covered the shoulders and arms, wasn't cut deeper than 2 fingers' breadth under the pit of the throat. Very precise. And, critically, reached a bit beyond the knees. Now, obviously, cultural applications in specific garments adapt over time, but the principle remains the same. The most sacred, intimate areas associated with human dignity and sexuality, typically the shoulders, the chest area, the pelvic region, the upper legs, require substantial coverage to protect the integrity of the person and prevent objectification.
Got it. So the principle endures. Finally, in this section, let's touch on the grave moral gravity that arises when a particular garment or style becomes what the Church calls a proximate occasion of sin.
Yes. Pope Pius XII addresses very directly. He stated clearly, style must never be a proximate occasion of sin. This isn't a light suggestion. It's a profound pastoral and moral warning. An individual has a grave moral duty rooted in protecting their own soul and also in charity towards the souls of others to remove any such proximate occasion of sin from their life.
So, if a certain way of dressing, whether through exposure or through revealing the form, consistently constitutes a grave and proximate occasion of sin for oneself or for others,
and therefore endangers salvation, the individual has a serious moral duty to give it up. This applies both ways, to the person presenting themselves and to the observer struggling with lust. But focusing on the presenter, the choice to wear garments primarily designed to solicit that reductive, lustful gaze falls squarely into this serious moral category. It's not neutral.
All right, now we wade into probably the most contentious area, right? The common secular critique that frames modesty as just an oppressive burden, something placed unfairly on women, mainly for the sake of controlling them or managing men's lust.
That's the standard narrative you hear constantly.
Our source material emphatically says the Catholic understanding is horribly reversed from that secular view. How is it reversed?
It's reversed because that secular critique makes fundamental error. It assumes the primary beneficiary of modesty is the observer, usually seen as the man who might be tempted. The Church insists, no, the primary beneficiary of modesty is the person who wears it. Modesty is, first and foremost, an act of what one source calls selfless self-preservation. And it's a powerful demonstration of self-respect. It's fundamentally about asserting one's own dignity.
So if my body is sacred, then modesty is the way I actively assert, hey, this sacred reality here, it's worthy of protection, it's reserved, it's not for common use.
Exactly. It denotes your own inherent value. It protects you from someone else's potential desire to use you. And this completely reframes modesty, doesn't it? It's not primarily a restriction imposed from outside. It's a profound form of power exercised from within the power of self-possession.
Let's dig into that a bit more. Modesty as power. Chastity, which modesty serves, is often called an apprenticeship in self-mastery. How does that connect?
Well, self-mastery is the absolute hallmark of true freedom, isn't it? The truly free person isn't the one enslaved to every passion or trend. The truly free person is the one who governs their passions, who possesses themselves.
Right.
The modest person, in this view, exercises real agency. They assert their dignity and actively refuse to be objectified, refuse to be reduced to a means for someone else's end. Conversely, the person who just succumbs to fashion pressures or deliberately chooses immodesty, you could argue they've functionally surrendered their agency. They've become almost a willing object for the consumer gaze, tossed about by the whims of fleeting cultural trends.
So the argument is, counterintuitively maybe, that modesty actually makes the person more powerful, not less.
In terms of authentic self-possession, yes. But while that primary duty is self-respect, self-preservation, we absolutely have to address the secondary obligation. Modesty as an act of charity toward one's neighbor. And this is where the tension really arises, isn't it? Between the man's responsibility for his own sin and the woman's responsibility in how she dresses. Yes, this is a very delicate area, and the sources are careful to balance it. We must start by acknowledging the fundamental truth. Christ's own command in Matthew 5 about lusting in the heart, it places the full moral responsibility for the sin of lust squarely on the observer. If a man lusts, he sins, period. Regardless of what the other person is wearing, his interior life, his thoughts, his choices, those are his responsibility before God.
The command is harsh. Pluck out your eye if it causes you to sin.
Exactly. He bears the burden of his sin. However, we cannot just stop there, because Christian morality also demands profound charity toward our neighbor. We have a duty to love them, which includes not needlessly putting temptation in their way. The National Catholic Register analysis that our source material cites, it articulates this tension really well, I think. It says, look, while teaching men and boys to behave themselves and act like gentlemen is absolutely right and necessary.
Of course.
Teaching girls and women that they can just dress however they want and expect boys to just be gentlemen is, well, it's naive.
Yeah.
And in the context of real Christian charity, it's potentially a serious failure. It's described as putting boys through hell, and it's not Christian behavior.
Why? Because it ignores the objective reality of the fallen human heart, the reality of concupiscence, that disordered desire.
Precisely. We live, as the source says, in a sex-drenched society.
Yeah.
We're saturated with sexual imagery and suggestion. The human heart is already disordered, already struggling because of the fall. So in that context, to deliberately choose to wear something that constitutes a grave and proximate occasion of sin in public, that's a profound failure of Christian charity. It's like leaving a stumbling block right in the path of someone you know is already struggling to walk straight.
So, while the observer carries the full weight of his sin if he consents to lust, the presenter carries the moral failure of placing an easily avoidable obstacle, a lack of love.
Yes, it's a failure of charity. It is an act of love to help our neighbor avoid sin, to make the path to virtue easier for them, not harder.
Right.
And deliberate, provocative immodesty often does the opposite. So both individuals are morally culpable, but in their own distinct spheres. The man potentially for the sin of lust, the woman potentially for the failure of charity.
This really shifts the internal question, doesn't it? It moves from, is this outfit technically allowed, or is it bad, to something deeper. Is this outfit an act of love and protection both for my own dignity and for the spiritual well-being of my neighbor?
And that, I think, for the serious Catholic learner trying to integrate all this, that's the ultimate measure. Modesty becomes this unified exercise. It's justice to oneself through self-mastery and self-respect, and it's justice and charity towards the neighbor by actively seeking not to be the stumbling block.
Wow. Okay, we've covered a lot of ground. The objective nature of modesty rooted in NML and Imago Dei. The philosophical reasons why objectification harms the person via the personalist norm, and these duties of self-possession and charity. Let's try to wrap things up by looking at the spiritual fruit of the two opposing choices here. The invitation to consume versus the invitation to communion.
That's a great way to frame the conclusion, because our choices bear fruit, don't they? the choice to dress immodestly, particularly through that immodesty of form or immodesty of exposure we discussed, it functions, whether intended or not, as a kind of invitation. An invitation to be seen reductively, to be seen as an object available for use, for consumption. The clothing itself can broadcast a message. Look here, consume this aspect.
And the sources call this public offering, this invitation, a terrible lie. Why a lie?
It's a lie because it hides, or at least obscures, the true, deeper, intrinsic value of the person. It hides their mind, their soul, their character, their capacity for love behind the objectified body part that's put on display. So the immodest choice tends to primarily attract those who are looking to consume the body for pleasure, not those who are seeking to love the whole person in their totality.
So it acts like a magnet for use and potentially a repellent for genuine, self-giving love.
That's the argument, yes. It attracts the wrong kind of attention for the wrong reasons.
Okay, this brings us then to the really profound paradox of modesty, the Catholic reversal of the common cultural narrative. The world seems to shout, show yourself, be visible, put it all out there to prove your worth. But according to this theology, that very showing often ends up hiding the real person.
Exactly. The Catholic logic flips that completely on its head. The modest person, through their actions and choices, asserts something different. They say, implicitly, because of my profound objective value as a person, as a temple of God, I cover myself appropriately. And this act of veiling, of reserving, paradoxically, it's what truly reveals the person's dignity.
How so?
By refusing to unveil what should remain hidden, the modest person actively thwarts that reductive consumer gaze. They put up a boundary.
Because if the gaze is frustrated, if it can't just stop and fixate on the sexualized part, it's almost forced to move on, to engage with the personhood.
That's the idea.
Yeah.
The modest clothing acts like a shield in that sense. It pushes the observer, if they're willing, to move past the body as mere object and to engage with the face. And the face, biblically and philosophically, is the primary, almost sacramental sign of the person, of their unique identity, their soul.
So the source saying the woman who veils her body with modest clothing is revealing her dignity means she's demanding to be seen correctly as a whole person.
Yes. She's demanding to be encountered as a subject, not an object. And this clarity of self-respect, this assertion of inherent worth, it tends to attract people of goodwill, as one text puts it. People who are genuinely interested in a true communion of persons based on mutual total love and respect, not on use or consumption.
So modesty ultimately isn't about covering up something bad or shameful. It's actually the highest form of respect for something incredibly sacred and good.
It's presented as the only way to ensure that the body is seen correctly as the sacred, dignified sacrament of the person, reserved in its intimate totality for that exclusive covenantal communion of persons found in self-giving love. It ensures that love, not consumption, becomes the primary language of encounter.
#outro.
Wow. This has really been quite a deep dive. We've tried to shift the whole conversation about modesty away from just subjective opinions and feelings and anchor it firmly in objective doctrinal truth. We established its basis in the unchanging natural moral law. We applied that powerful philosophical lens of the personalist norm, always seeing the person as an end, never just a means. And we explored the profound spiritual economics of the gift, didn't we? How exclusivity is just essential for the integrity of total intimacy. Hopefully this gives you, our listener, the framework to move beyond just cultural arguments and really ground your choices in objective dignity.
And for you, our dedicated learner, maybe hold on to this key thought. Modesty isn't about rejecting beauty. It's not a punishment, not something negative. It's about the proper stewardship, the proper management of the sacred space that is your body. And it's presented as the only way to ensure that your beauty serves its absolute highest purpose, which is total, exclusive, self-giving love. It protects your capacity for true communion.
So here's that one final thought for you to maybe explore this week, to mull over. If modesty is fundamentally an act of self-possession, an act of personal power and agency, what's one single, maybe small, daily choice you can make? Perhaps regarding clothing, maybe online presentation, maybe just how you interact with others. One choice to consciously assert your own dignity and actively refuse that consumer gaze. How can you strengthen your own capacity for that total gift of self, that act of mastery? That's something really worth meditating on, isn't it?
Indeed it is. We look forward to diving deep with you again next time.